As 2023 draws to a close, I want to take a few moments to review the progress I've made on the Union project. Looking back over the last 12 months, I can see that I've spent a considerable amount of time working on railroad infrastructure, and it's encouraging to note that this work has finally been completed. Moving forward, I can now focus on the aspects of the hobby I truly enjoy, modeling a dystopian landscape. Let's get started. The year kicked off with a sense of urgency as I was set to host our local railroad club in the second week of February, and I still didn't have a completed main line. I realized that I had made some mistakes in calculating the elevations for the Bathurst Yard. Measurement and planning mistakes resulted in a too steep a grade of 4.5%. I had to disassemble the upper deck, modify some elevations, and increase clearances wherever possible to reduce the grade to a more manageable 3%. I also had to make decisions about track painting and ballasting, as once the tabletop was installed, I wouldn't be able to access that portion of track. I also had to come up with a solution for mounting switch machines on the tabletop rather than the underside, as I hadn't considered that the benchwork was going to interfere with some of the points. With this portion of the main line complete, I was able to now shift my focus to the passenger platforms at Union Station. Using Google Maps and Google Earth, I set to work figuring out the dimensions for Union. It was no surprise that the station was much larger than my available space, and I calculated that I would need to reduce the station size by over 60%. Before diving into the actual station design, I designed and 3D printed the ironwork for the passenger platforms. Happy with the ironwork size and spacing, I printed various mock-ups of Union Station. The biggest challenge was striking a balance between the need to reduce the station's length without compromising its height, as these proportions are part of its character. I worked on mock-ups for the Spadina and Bathurst bridges, a condominium tower, and the Aldershot station. While the bridges turned out well, the condominium towers proved oversized, leading me to abandon them. Additionally, I would eventually forego the Aldershot station in favor of a completely new idea. Recognizing the sheer size of Union Station and the condominium towers, I had serious doubts about my ability to scratch build structures that big. While I was confident in my ability to 3D print accessories, printing structures of such a scale was beyond reasonable. Fortunately, a solution presented itself when I stumbled on a laser cutting review by Steve's Trains, and I decided to invest in a low-powered laser cutter. I started my laser cutting journey by recreating a small maintenance building at the Bathurst Yard. Designing the structure in Illustrator, I imported the wall and brick templates into my laser cutter. After much trial and error, I realized the laser cutter wasn't entirely suitable for styrene, as it could scorch the plastic and it produced noxious gases. However, I settled on a valuable compromise. The laser did an excellent job of scoring styrene. This allowed me to create kits that could be easily snapped along these lines. While I wasn't using the laser cutter as exactly intended, I was pleased with the compromise I had found. The maintenance buildings turned out great, I had a path forward with the laser, and I was fairly certain I could model the larger buildings. I next started working on the bridges at Spadina and Bathurst. During the planning phases, I stumbled upon Cato streetcars named mini-trams. One of the models closely resembled the streetcars of the TTC. I decided to incorporate a streetcar line that looped from the Spadina Bridge, ran behind the backdrop, and re-emerged on Bathurst Street. To create this new level, I strengthened the benchwork and tried embedding code 55 track into streets, using plaster and styrene. It was a challenging project because the streetcar tolerances required precise track work. I next turned my attention to creating two distinct styles of bridge piers. For Spadina, I constructed the piers using square and round dowels purchased from the dollar store, while the Bathurst Street Bridge, I used laser-cut piers from 1/4-inch plywood. The final step involved adding railings to the Spadina Bridge and the truss and girder systems for the Bathurst Bridge. I designed a reasonably accurate facsimile of the Bathurst Street Bridge and 3D printed the individual pieces, assembling and installing them along the bridge just like a kit. During the summer, I took a break from modeling and spent time rail fanning. On one such trip, I visited the overpass near Mimico Station, documenting the Via Rail and GO Transit maintenance facilities. After publishing a video about the trip, I was offered a tour of the Via Rail yard, and I enjoyed a few hours touring the facility. I gained insights into the different areas of the yard, timetable information, and even got to explore some of the historical equipment. Inspired what I had seen, I decided to abandon my original plans for the Aldershot passenger station and revise that area of the layout to include the Via Rail maintenance yard. This was no small feat, considering the yard spans over 100 acres and I needed to condense it into a shelf that was 8 feet long. I designed the new yard, capturing some basic features with a track plan that now provided additional storage from a rolling stock. I opted for manual turnout controls for this yard, as all the turnouts would be close to the front of the layout, and I didn't want to invest time and energy into creating a new group of Arduino-controlled points. With this last piece of track work completed, I finally was able to declare the main line and all supporting sidings finished. I painted and weathered the tracks, wiped the rails clean with a rag, and spent hours polishing and cleaning every inch of the rail until the trains ran perfectly. The last major project for the year was the installation of the backdrop. In hindsight, I wish I had installed the backdrop earlier, but I hadn't considered the layout's lighting and other details. Using different latex paints, a roller, and an airbrush, I freehand painted the ominous and hazy sky. Once again, I turned to the laser cutter to create a series of differently sized stencils, airbrushing various buildings across the horizon line, giving the backdrop some depth. Since the backdrop, it might seem like much of the layout progress has stagnated, but there's been a lot happening behind the scenes. Soon I'll be installing the station platforms at Union Station, constructing the station itself, and tackling one of the largest background buildings I've ever worked on. Additionally, I've been very fortunate to find a number of affordable plastic kits of urban buildings, and I can hardly wait to dive back into crafting a dystopic city, which is the core inspiration for this railroad. The new year promises a lot of exciting developments. Thanks for following along with my progress in 2023. I wish you all the best in the coming year, and I hope you join the Dystopia for 2024. See you next year.